In the beginning, Babylon was not a city of legend. It was not the jewel of Mesopotamia nor the center of an empire. It was a settlement, modest, quiet, and overshadowed by the giants of its age. Yet from this unremarkable beginning, a story would unfold that shaped the ancient world. To understand Babylon's rise, we must first understand the land that cradled it. Southern Mesopotamia was a place of contradictions, a land of abundance and danger, and the people who lived here, Sumerians, Akkadians, Amorites, learned to survive by mastering the water. They dug canals, built dikes, redirected rivers. They turned chaos into order. This mastery of irrigation created something new. The world's first cities, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Nippur. These were the centers of early civilization, powerful, wealthy, and ancient. The earliest traces of Babylon appear in the late 4th millennium BC, a small settlement, a provincial town, a place mentioned only in passing in early records. Its name, Babylon, comes to us through Greek, but its Akkadian form, Bab Ilim, meant gate of the god, and even that name was borrowed from an older Sumerian phrase, Kadingir Ra, the gate of the divine. A grand name for a place that at the time held no real power. But Babylon had something more important than temples or armies. It had location, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, at the crossroads of trade routes and irrigation canals. Babylon sat on the boundary between two worlds, Sumer in the south, Akkad in the north. It was a meeting point, a place where cultures blended, a place perfectly positioned for future greatness. But for centuries, Babylon remained in the shadows. Around 2334 BC, a man named Sargon rose to power in the northern city of Akkad. He built the world's first empire, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Babylon became part of this new imperial world, still small, still quiet, but now connected to something larger. The Akkadian Empire brought roads, administration, and a shared language. It tied the region together in ways never seen before. When the empire eventually collapsed, Babylon did not vanish with it. Instead, it remained a survivor in a land of ruins. After the fall of Akkad, power shifted south. The third dynasty of Ur, a Neo-Sumerian revival, rose to dominate Mesopotamia. Ur became the center of a flourishing state. Its kings built ziggurats, revived Sumerian culture, and ruled over a vast network of cities. Babylon became a provincial administrative center, not independent, not powerful, but stable. It was during this period that Babylon's potential began to take shape. Its canals expanded, its trade routes strengthened, its population grew. But the Neo-Sumerian state was fragile, and beyond its borders, new forces were gathering. Around 2000 BC, waves of Amorite tribes migrated into Mesopotamia. They were pastoralists, traders, and warriors. Not conquerors at first, but settlers. Over time, they rose to power in city after city. In 1894 BC, an Amorite leader named Sumuabum took control of the city. He did not yet rule an empire, he did not yet command armies that stretched across the land, but he founded a dynasty that would change everything. Under Sumuabum and his successors, Babylon began to grow, slowly at first, quietly, but steadily. They built fortifications, strengthened canals, expanded trade, formed alliances and rivalries. Babylon was no longer a provincial town, it was becoming a player in the complex political landscape of southern Mesopotamia, but it was still overshadowed by stronger powers. Larsa dominated the south, Eshnunna controlled the northeast, Mari ruled the Euphrates trade routes, Assyria was rising in the north, Babylon was stable, but not yet great. That would change with the arrival of one man, a king whose name would echo across history, Hammurabi. The rise of Babylon, the true rise, was about to begin. When Hammurabi ascended the throne of Babylon in 1792 BC, he inherited a kingdom that was stable but small, a city with potential but surrounded by rivals far older, richer, and more powerful. Babylon was not yet the center of anything, but Hammurabi was patient. He understood something that few kings of his age grasped. Power is not taken in a single stroke. It is built quietly, steadily, piece by piece. Hammurabi's first years were not marked by conquest. They were marked by preparation. He repaired irrigation canals, the arteries of Mesopotamian life. He strengthened city walls, he reorganized taxation, he restored temples and honored the gods. These acts were not glamorous, but they built trust, they built stability, they built the foundation of something far greater. While other kings rushed into war, Hammurabi built a kingdom worth fighting for, and he waited. Mesopotamia in Hammurabi's time was a mosaic of competing powers. No single state dominated the region. Every city-state watched the others with suspicion. Larsa and Isin fought for control of the south. Eshnuna pushed westward. Mari guarded its trade routes. Assyria eyed expansion. It was a world of shifting alliances, sudden betrayals, and constant tension. A world perfectly suited for a strategist. In 1763 BC, Hammurabi made his move. His first target was Larsa, the most powerful kingdom in southern Mesopotamia. For decades, Larsa had overshadowed Babylon. Its wealth came from trade with the Persian Gulf and from fertile lands to the south. But Hammurabi saw an opportunity. Larsa's king, Rimsin, had grown old. His alliances were weakening, his enemies were gathering. Hammurabi struck swiftly. He captured key cities, Uruk, Isin, and others, breaking Larsa's hold on the region. The victory was decisive. For the first time, Babylon stood as a major power. But Hammurabi was not finished. With the south secured, Hammurabi turned his attention north and east. Eshnuna, long a rival, was conquered in 1761 BC. Its lands, rich in trade and agriculture, were absorbed into Babylon. At the same time, conflict erupted with Mari, the powerful kingdom along the middle Euphrates. Mari had once been an ally. Its king Zimri-Lim had supported Hammurabi in earlier wars, but alliances in Mesopotamia were fragile, and Hammurabi had outgrown the need for partners. Mari fell. Its palaces were looted, its territory absorbed. With these victories, Hammurabi controlled nearly all of southern Mesopotamia and much of the north. From the Persian Gulf to the Euphrates bend, Babylon now stood supreme. By the end of his campaigns, Hammurabi ruled the largest kingdom Mesopotamia had seen since the days of Sargon of Akkad. But Hammurabi was not merely a conqueror, he was a builder of systems, of laws, of identity. He governed through a network of appointed governors. He controlled canals, trade routes, and markets. He centralized authority in Babylon, and he elevated Marduk, Babylon's patron god, to the head of the Mesopotamian pantheon. This was more than religion, it was politics. If Marduk was supreme, then Babylon, his city, was the rightful center of the world. Hammurabi's most enduring legacy was not his conquests, but his laws. Carved into a towering black stele, the Code of Hammurabi was placed in the heart of Babylon for all to see. Its prologue declared that Hammurabi received these laws from Marduk himself to establish justice, protect the weak, and uphold order. Farming, marriage, crime, property, contracts, wages, inheritance. But justice in Babylon was not equal. Punishments depended on social class. A noble and a commoner were not judged the same. A slave's life was valued less than that of a free man. Yet the code also protected widows, orphans, and tenant farmers. It regulated debts and working conditions. It limited exploitation. For its time, it was revolutionary, and it became the foundation of Babylonian stability. Hammurabi died in 1750 BC. His empire was vast, his achievements unmatched. But empires built on the strength of one man rarely survive long. His son, Samsu-iluna, inherited a kingdom strained by decades of war. Rebellions erupted in the south. Cities broke away. Assyria grew stronger. The Kassites, a mountain people from the east, began to appear in the region. The empire fractured, and in 1595 BC, the Hittites swept down from Anatolia, sacked Babylon, and vanished as quickly as they came. In the chaos that followed, the Kassites took control. The first Babylonian empire was gone. But Babylon itself endured, and centuries later it would rise again, higher than ever before. When the first Babylonian empire collapsed, it seemed as though Babylon's moment had passed. The Kassites ruled for centuries. Assyria rose to dominate the Near East. Elam raided the south, and Babylon, though respected, was no longer the center of the world. But Babylon had a way of returning, and in the 7th century BC, it rose again. Not as a provincial capital, not as a vassal, but as the beating heart of a new empire, a rebirth that would reshape the ancient world. For centuries, Assyria had been the superpower of Mesopotamia. Its armies were unmatched. Its kings ruled with iron discipline. Its capital cities, Ashur, Nimrud, Nineveh, were symbols of imperial might. But empires are fragile things. By the mid 7th century BC, Assyria was exhausted. Decades of war had drained its strength. Internal rivalries fractured its leadership. Rebellions flared across its vast territories, and in Babylon a new leader emerged, a Chaldean prince named Nabopolassar. In 626 BC, he led a revolt that drove the Assyrians out of Babylon. He was proclaimed king, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. But Nabopolassar knew that Babylon alone could not defeat Assyria, so he sought allies. To the east, the Medes, fierce mountain warriors, were also rising. Their king, Cyaxares, shared Nabopolassar's goal, the destruction of Assyria. Together, they launched a coordinated assault. In 614 BC, the Medes captured Ashur. In 612 BC, Babylonian and Median forces stormed Nineveh. The city fell in flames. The last great Assyrian king died in battle. The empire that had dominated the Near East for centuries was gone, and from its ashes, Babylon rose once more. When Nabopolassar died in 605 BC, his son took the throne. His name was Nebuchadnezzar II, and under his rule Babylon reached the height of its power. Nebuchadnezzar was a conqueror, a strategist, a builder, a king whose ambition reshaped the landscape of Mesopotamia. His early years were marked by military campaigns across the Levant. He fought Egypt, he subdued Phoenician cities, he besieged Jerusalem twice. In 597 BC, he deported Judah's elite to Babylon. In 586 BC, after a second revolt, he destroyed Solomon's temple and brought the kingdom of Judah to an end. These events would echo through history, remembered as the Babylonian captivity. But Nebuchadnezzar's greatest legacy was not carved in war, it was built in brick. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon became the largest and most magnificent city of its age, a city of temples, palaces, gardens, and walls so vast that ancient writers struggled to describe them. At its heart stood the Esagila, the great temple of Marduk. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt and expanded it, adorning it with cedar beams, gold, and precious stone. Beside it rose the Itemenanki, the towering ziggurat whose name meant house of the foundation of heaven and earth. It rose nearly 90 meters into the sky, a mountain of brick and bitumen. Many believe this structure inspired the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. But Babylon's wonders did not end there. To enter Babylon was to pass through a masterpiece. The Ishtar Gate, faced with deep blue glazed bricks, shimmered like a jewel in the desert sun. Its walls were adorned with lions, bulls, and dragons, the sacred animals of Ishtar and Marduk. From the gate stretched the processional way, paved with stone and lined with lion reliefs. During festivals, priests, musicians, and statues of the gods would travel this road in grand procession. It was not merely a street, it was a statement, a declaration that Babylon was the center of the world. No wonder if Babylon is more famous or more mysterious than the Hanging Gardens. Ancient writers described them as a lush, terraced paradise rising above the city, a mountain of greenery in the heart of the desert, a gift, they said, from Nebuchadnezzar to his Median wife, Amytis, who longed for the cool mountains of her homeland. But the truth is uncertain. No Babylonian text mentions the gardens. No archaeological evidence has been found. Some scholars believe they may have been located in Nineveh instead. Yet the legend endures, because Babylon was a city that inspired imagination, a city where myth and reality intertwined. Nebuchadnezzar's palace complex dominated the eastern bank of the Euphrates. It included throne rooms, courtyards, storerooms, and administrative halls. It was here that the king received envoys, issued decrees, and oversaw the empire. It was here that the wealth of the Near East flowed, tribute from conquered lands, goods from distant traders, offerings to the gods. And it was here, according to later tradition, that Nebuchadnezzar walked the rooftop and declared, "Is this not the great Babylon that I have built?" A moment of pride that would echo through biblical memory. Babylon was not only a city of walls and temples, it was a center of learning. Its scholars studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and literature. They tracked the movements of planets. They recorded eclipses, they developed sophisticated calendars. Babylonian astronomers laid the foundations for later Greek and Islamic science. Its scribes preserved myths, epics, and hymns, including older Sumerian traditions. In Babylon, knowledge was power, and the city became a beacon of intellectual life. For more than 40 years, Nebuchadnezzar II ruled Babylon with a steady hand. He expanded its borders, rebuilt its temples, and transformed it into the greatest metropolis of its age. Under his reign, Babylon was a city of power, wealth, and wonder, a place that dazzled travelers and intimidated rivals. But no empire survives on monuments alone. And when Nebuchadnezzar died, the foundations of Babylon began to tremble. Nebuchadnezzar's son, Amel-Marduk, inherited the throne, but not his father's authority. He ruled for only 2 years before being overthrown in a palace coup. His successor, Neriglissar, reigned briefly. Then came a child king, Labashi-Marduk, murdered after only a few months. In just 6 years, Babylon saw 3 kings rise and fall. The dynasty that had rebuilt the empire was collapsing under its own weight. Into this chaos stepped a man who was not of royal blood, a man whose decisions would open the gates to a new world. His name was Nabonidus. Nabonidus was an unusual ruler. He was deeply religious, but not in the traditional Babylonian way. Instead of honoring Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon, he favored Sin, the moon god. This was more than a theological preference. It was a political disaster. The priesthood of Marduk held enormous influence. Their rituals legitimized kings. Their temples anchored the city's identity. By sidelining Marduk, Nabonidus undermined the very foundation of Babylonian kingship. And then he made an even stranger decision. He left. For nearly a decade, Nabonidus abandoned Babylon and lived in the distant oasis of Tema in northern Arabia. He focused on trade routes, desert politics, and religious reforms, while the empire's heart was left in the hands of his son Belshazzar. To the Babylonians, this was unthinkable. A king who did not attend the New Year festival, a king who did not perform the sacred rites, a king who did not honor Marduk, was no king at all. Babylon was vulnerable, and beyond its borders a new power was rising. The Persian Empire was expanding with astonishing speed. Its ruler Cyrus the Great had already conquered Media, Lydia, and vast territories across Iran and Anatolia. Now he turned his eyes toward Babylon. In 539 BC, the Persian army crossed the Tigris. Nabonidus attempted to resist, but the Babylonian forces were demoralized and divided. The decisive battle came near Opis. Babylon's army was crushed. The road to the capital lay open. But Babylon did not fall by siege. It fell by surrender. Ancient accounts differ on the details. Some say the Persians diverted the Euphrates and entered the city along its dry riverbed. Others say Babylonian nobles opened the gates, preferring Cyrus to their own king. What is certain is this: Babylon fell without a fight. Cyrus entered the city as a liberator. He spared the temples. He honored Marduk. He restored religious traditions that Nabonidus had neglected. The Neo-Babylonian Empire was gone, but Babylon itself lived on as one of the great capitals of the Persian world. Under the Achaemenid Persians, Babylon remained important. It was one of the empire's administrative centers. Its temples continued to function. Its scholars continued their work. But the political heart of the empire shifted elsewhere, to Susa, Persepolis, and Pasargadae. Babylon was no longer the center of the world. It was a jewel in someone else's crown. And yet, its story was not over. In 331 BC, after defeating the Persians at Gaugamela, Alexander the Great marched into Babylon. The city surrendered without resistance. Alexander entered as a conqueror, but also as a visionary. He saw Babylon not as a relic, but as a future capital, a place from which he could rule his vast empire. He ordered the restoration of the Asagila temple. He planned new canals, new palaces, new roads. For a moment, it seemed Babylon might rise again, but fate intervened. In 323 BC, Alexander fell ill in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. After days of fever, he died, in the very city he hoped to make the center of the world. With his death, his empire fractured, his generals carved it into pieces, and Babylon's last chance at rebirth slipped away. After Alexander, Babylon passed to the Seleucid Empire. At first it remained important, but when Seleucus I founded a new capital, Seleucia on the Tigris, Babylon's decline accelerated. Its population dwindled, its temples fell into disrepair, its canals silted up, its fields turned to dust. By the time the Parthians ruled the region, Babylon was a shadow of its former self, a city of memories, not power. By the 1st century BC, Greek and Roman writers described it as nearly deserted, its ziggurats crumbling, its walls collapsing, its streets overgrown, and by the time the Arabs conquered Mesopotamia in the 7th century AD, Babylon was gone. Its bricks had been quarried for new cities, its temples reduced to mounds, its name preserved only in stories. And yet, Babylon never truly died.